Welcome to the Ambronite Superhero Podcast with Simo This show is your backstage pass to discussions with world-class influencers in the field of health, nutrition, and high performance. We bring you the selected tips and insights that you can use to upgrade your life and become unstoppable.
So, Christian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Simo.
So, you're a medical doctor with some experience in research when it comes to genetics, nutrigenomics. So we often get asked, and it's been a common topic. So lately, there's been a lot of discussion about the comparison between synthetic meal replacements and synthetic foods and vitamin supplements, for example, compared to real food. So from a medical perspective, what's so different about those two?
So I always postulate that you should see food as a kind of medicine. And if you look at plant-based foods, you will find in those plants compounds which are called plant hormetic compounds. And those plant hormetic compounds, which our listeners might know as polyphenols or flavonoids, are actually really what is the beneficial compound inside plants and which are making us more healthier. And because you will find the micronutrients, which are mainly the vitamins. You will find those in vitamins, but in supplements. But you also will find them in real food. But the difference here is really about those other compounds, which makes the differences here. And those hormetic compounds are actually, the interesting thing is, and it's quite a paradox, that they're actually slightly toxic because they're supposed to be fighting off some, let's say, insects or parasites for the plants in order to defend themselves. But if a human being is consuming those slightly toxic compounds, it actually triggers certain cell responses. So it puts the cell in a state of stress. And by that, it will activate certain molecular pathways, which are in return will be beneficial for our well-being. And so here, the magic happens, basically.
Interesting. So it's a maybe a form of anti-fragility that a small stress actually makes us stronger and makes us more healthier.
Yeah.
Break through walls. Be a superhero.
Is this something that's found in the whole of the plant kingdom, like all of the plant-based foods that we eat?
Absolutely, yeah. Of course, we will find different hormetic compounds or different systems of hormesis. But in general, I would say all the plants, they do have some sort of a defending mechanism. Yeah. And for example, if you look at kale, for example, you will have something called the Isothiocyanates. And those are also regarded as being a hormetic compound, and they do have those beneficial effects I was just mentioned here. And to dive a bit deeper here, so those isothiocyanates, they are able to really alter gene expression. So they might turn off certain genes. So they might turn off genes which are actually pro-cancerogenic.
Right.
But they must also turn on tumor suppressor genes simultaneously. So that's why in that sense you will have a benefit regarding cancer. And so this is really, it really comes down to those compounds which you will not find in artificial supplements.
Very interesting. So you mentioned kale. Are some foods richer in these beneficial compounds than others?
There are some research showing that actually it also depends on the way how you farm the plants or the fruits in order the levels and in order for them to develop certain levels of those beneficial compounds. It really depends on the kind of soil the plant is getting, and by that the levels of hormetic compounds or also antioxidants and other beneficial compounds will change. And the levels are different, obviously. So,
is there a difference between industrial agriculture versus organic versus wild versus
there are studies out there which show a clear difference. Absolutely, yes.
And how does that? How do the differences manifest? What are the differences here? Say industrially farmed produce versus organic versus wild harvested. So what are the differences? Are there any main types of differences between organic, non-organic agriculture, wild harvested plants, or are there some common themes there?
Organic growing your plants organically, of course, has certain advantages, especially in respect to sustainability. But also, if you look at the agriculture or like large-scale agriculture, then those methods are getting better and better every day. So by that, they're actually achieving high levels of antioxidants and high levels of aromatic compounds inside the plant by really refining those processes of growing the plants, basically.
Okay, that's a very positive signal in something that's often been considered as inferior, but it actually comes down to the soil and the growing techniques, and not necessarily some certain kind of label that is a guarantee of the nutrient density. Very interesting. Is there something that people often make big mistakes in when they think about compiling their nutrition out of mainly going for on a nutrient per nutrient scale? For example, thinking about I have to get my daily vitamins. Either I eat a bowl of salad or go for a multivitamin pill. What are some of the main misconceptions that you see people who are not educated in this topic make?
It is really about, for a lot of people, they try to see a supplement as really a substitute for substituting certain deficiencies inside their daily diet. So that should be not the approach you should follow. You should still make sure you get a proper diet, and then additionally get, if you want, and if you still think you might have higher requirements regarding a certain nutrient or whatever, then you can think of supplementing that. Or of course, it also depends on the kind of diet you're living. If you're going full vegan, of course it would make sense actually to supplement, for example, DHA and EPA and omega-3s, because the ALA might not be sufficient for you what you're getting out of the vegan diet. So
probably also B12, for example.
For example, B12 would be another interesting compound you should definitely look into. And but the list goes on here. So for example, if you look at creatinine, for example, it was showing that if vegans or vegetarians taking creatinine on a daily basis, they have significantly improved their cognitive function, because they will not get that from their diet. They're basically missing out on that. Of course, it's not an essential compound. You will survive without taking in creatinine. So let's restart here. So it actually makes sense also to take in creatine, because it was showing in different studies that vegans or vegetarians, which are increasing their intake in creatine, were also increasing their cognitive functions, because they're not getting any creatine with their daily diet, because they're not consuming any meat-based products. So of course that compound creatine is not an essential or vital in order to survive, but still it might boost certain capabilities of your body. Yeah.
So creatine supplementation for someone on a vegan diet or even a plant-based diet with a limited amount of meat and animal products. So that could yield some cognitive benefits?
Yes, that's what studies are showing, yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I think creatine has ever since, I think, the late 70s or 80s been one of the most researched compounds in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
I don't think that the popular opinion about creatine is as much linked to also the cognitive benefits that we're seeing.
Not really, no. But I think this, as you mentioned, creatine is certainly regarded as one of the safest substances you can consume, basically, as a supplement. And because, as you mentioned, it's quite well researched. A lot of researches have been done about that. And the link between cognitive function, creatine, it's a rather new one, I would say. Yeah.
Interesting.
Ambronite Superhero Podcast. Be unstoppable.
What are some of the other aspects when you think about where you get your food from, plant-based versus other sources, in terms of, for example, bioavailability, your body's capability of assimilating the nutrients and so forth? So for someone who is looking to hit all their nutritional needs and their bases, which techniques do you see that are working?
I always claim that consuming whole food is basically really a safe bet to comprehensively cover all your nutritional needs.
So can you give an example of a fruit that has these hormetic compounds?
I think in Finland, the bilberries are quite popular, yeah? And also the blueberries, which are similar, right? And so they are showing high levels of anthocyanins. And those anthocyanins are actually also regarded as hormetic compounds, which might help in Alzheimer prevention because of triggering certain cellular responses and activating certain gene expression pathways. And that's pretty interesting. So there was just, I think, a study done 5 years ago that was showing that if you feed mice a regular diet of bilberries or blueberries, they will actually reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's, because the mice were engineered to have Alzheimer's. So you could basically completely reverse the symptoms.
It's impressive.
Just by consuming bilberries or blueberries.
Very impressive. Yeah. So mice with Alzheimer's can get their cognitive functions restored, or even was it the study made in a fashion that showed that the Alzheimer development is actually stopped or even reversed?
Reversed. It was all about reverse.
That's intense.
They were behaving like mice which were not affected at all. Yeah.
And we're talking about a wild berry that grows, pretty much wild in the forest, or actually grows wild in the forest.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. What are some other fruit or vegetables that are especially heavily researched in a similar fashion?
I mean, I would also like to give the example of, in general, green leaves. I mean, might sound quite simple, and why not just consume a little bit more salad? But of course, people sometimes they don't really do that. And if you look at green leaves, you will have inside the leaf, which makes it actually green, is the chlorophyll, right? And the chlorophyll molecule inside has a central magnesium ion. And that magnesium really helps you also for your body functions, because in our Western diets, or if you look at the American or European standard diet, we do have magnesium deficiencies. And by, for example, eating more green leaves, we basically can counteract those deficiencies, and by that supporting different subsystems in our bodies which are dependent on magnesium.
Right. How about digestion? What are the aspects of digestion when it comes to plant-based foods?
I think yesterday we touched upon the microbiome, right?
Yes.
So here again, things like dietary fiber is certainly a very important compound to consume.
So when it comes to a plant-based diet, a fully plant-based diet, what are the studies showing us?
Studies are showing us that people on a vegan, or also to some extent on a vegetarian diet, show lower BMIs, so have a lower risk actually to develop obesity. And also our listeners have to keep in mind that if you become obese, it will also change your gene expression. And that's pretty significant, because so the nutrients and also the amount of fat basically you store inside your bodies alter the kind of alter your epigenetics, alter your gene expression, alter the way genes are silenced, alter how genes are turned off and on. So, and an additional fact which is highly interesting is that those epigenetic markers actually can pass that on to your children.
To your children? So what you eat today is passed on to your children.
Actually, the information, yes.
The information. Yeah. This is pretty intense.
They are passed on. So that might be also an explanation for why. It's just one explanation out of many explanations why actually children of obesity parents are also become obese, or also develop chronic diseases earlier, like type 2 diabetes, because they have a change in their epigenetic markers, which might be a leading cause.
I'm not sure if people are aware that on a general level that their own choices, their own lifestyle choices, their own food choices, whether or not you follow a plant-based diet, whether or not you make otherwise wise choices on what you eat, are actually affecting the health of your children, of even the children that are, and your children might be bearing that for their entire lifetime. So I think that's something interesting that has not been on a public radar for that long of a time. How long have we known this? How long has this been a topic of research?
So, Simo, that was a quite interesting question here, because I would say the state of research just a decade ago or 2 decades ago was that the idea basically was that in the formation of the egg or the sperm, the body comes up with a clean slate of paper here, and the epigenetic information was completely removed, basically.
So everyone would, as they're born, everyone would have a clean slate, so to speak.
Exactly, yes, yeah. But that's not true. So just subsequent research was showing that this is not the case here. So we are actually passing on our epigenetic markers and our epigenetic differences to our children.
Ambronite Superhero Podcast. Live life to the fullest.
So there are no clean slates. You already have you already kind of have inherited some of your what would you call that actually? Would you call that you have inherited some of the expressions, or you have inherited some of the not only the DNA but how it's active, how certain aspects of it are activated? Or?
So as you know, you get a copy from your mother and you get a copy of your father of your DNA. But also additionally to your DNA code, you also receive those epigenetic markers, which are right on top of the DNA. Just think of it as another layer on top of your DNA. So a certain part of your DNA might be, for example, methylated. By that, it is silenced. So that part is not going to be expressed and not encoded into a protein, for example. So that's the idea behind epigenetic expression. Yes.
Right. So your parents give you the code, which is the DNA, but they also leave behind them some of the switches that they have themselves turned on or off.
Exactly. That's.
I wonder if that is like throughout human history, if that has served some kind of a purpose of adaptation, of like passing on some of your own adaptation from your environment to your children. For example, in nomadic societies or hunter-gatherer societies who have been changing their environment during their lifetime, and whether or not that has served some kind of a survival purpose of giving these switches or some of those switches also to your descendants or to your kids.
Yes, I mean there have been several hypotheses that also that you are also passing on your epigenetic markers are basically also a form of evolution. Yeah, so that you pass on those things you basically accumulate during your lifetime to your children, so they have a higher chance to survive basically in that kind of environment you were basically living. So it is a sort of also evolutionary process, or at least that's a hypothesis.
Right. So if and when you want to give your kids the best possible epigenetic switches, or leave them with the best chance of living a healthy life, then going for plant-based foods seems to make sense according to the research.
Absolutely, and of course always regular exercise.
Regular exercise, you can't remove that from.
That's another thing you also can pass on. Yes, yeah. But also our listeners have to be aware of the fact. I mean, not all epigenetic markers are passed on. It's just I would say a certain part of them, yeah. So still there is a certain amount of removal of those epigenetic markers, but still a part of them we're just passing on basically.
So do we have any conclusive research evidence on people who are making the change from, say, traditional Western diet, a typical Western diet, who probably want to lose weight, want to obtain better health, improve their body composition, going for plant-based foods? Yes. What are we seeing there?
I mean, we're seeing a lot, and that's why I'm surprised that it's so ignored by, let's say, the medical establishment, that we are able, just by using diets, that we're able actually really reversing chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes. So there's a lot of evidence out there, a lot of medical literature actually very clearly describe the effects of a healthy diet in order really to reverse those symptoms, reverse those syndromes, whatever. So that's clearly described. There's just nothing we actually should be arguing about. So the evidence is there. It's just for us to accept it and incorporate it into our diets.
That's a great way to conclude this talk. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Simo, for having me. It was a great time.
Thanks for listening to the Ambronite Superhero Podcast. Please check out the links, show notes, and other episodes at ambronite.com/podcast. That's AMBRONITE.com/podcast. Thanks again, and catch you in the next episode.